This is a Guide Your Light network production, creating podcasts with purpose.
My name is Kiani Mills, and this podcast is created to help you see, feel, and experience the human side of business. I'm a business owner, an entrepreneur, and a parent. And like many who have travelled this path before me, I've been through the lows of the lows and the gut-wrenching pain. But I've been through the triumphs and the wins and the indescribable highs, all of which I consider to be my lessons in the school of life. On this show, we are going to start some conversations to ignite new world ideas into some very old age businesses. So if you're a leader, a business mind, or an entrepreneur, get ready to think, act, and feel differently so that we can all reach a new level of business success together. So, what are you waiting for? Welcome back to this week's episode of She Can Humanise Business. This is a podcast that I created to really delve into the world that we live outside of just running businesses. Because as far as I'm concerned, business is life and life is business. So today I'm very, very, very excited to have this guest join me on the show. Welcome, Jeff. Welcome.
Thank you, Kiani.
We had a beautiful encounter of how we met, and it wasn't that long ago, was it?
No, not at all.
I feel like there is this, and I know that Todd and I both looked at each other and went, the universe has brought this gentleman into our world, having such a beautiful, profound conversation at the Spit in Mooloolaba.
So magical and spontaneous.
Wasn't it? We almost didn't go for a walk that day because it was starting to rain.
That's right.
And we met huddled underneath the end of the little lighthouse, hiding from the rain.
Yeah.
To me, that's like the beautiful gift that the world is, if your eyes are open to it.
Yes.
Of course.
Yes.
Yeah, it was beautiful. So look, I'm going to kick us off straight into it.
Sure.
Asking the question, what does humanising business mean to you?
Sure. Look, I think it's really about recognising the value and the role of the human element. And, it goes way beyond the likes of, say, personality profiling and things like that. I mean, I've done quite a bit of that. And probably to try and put it in a nutshell, I think it's really about looking for even and acknowledging the ghost in the machine. And, what is it that makes us humans tick? And are we running our businesses as though we know that? So, really it's starting at the beginning there, isn't it? Right from, how do we value our staff and our employees and our partners and our everybody? How do we see people?
It's a bit of a universal concept, isn't it? Which is why I love asking the question.
Yes.
Because it doesn't matter what you do for work or as a profession or where you live or how you live or I guess what your beliefs are. Humanising business, there is a human and there is a business element to everything we do, even as parents. We're still running a very tight ship as a parent.
Oh,
It's the same.
yes. And that's the interesting thing about it, isn't it? Because it's the same person at home is the person at work.
Yeah.
And, the old paradigm, leave your problems at the door. We don't want to know about it. Well, you see, we're beyond that now.
Yeah.
We can't operate like that anymore. It's a combined effort. And, it's not like two sides and you're on this side and we're on that side, where it's either integrated or it's not working.
Yeah, that's so true. And I guess for you in the industry of coaching and teaching and inspiring, what would you say are the fundamentals to what you teach that would aid in this humanising business concept?
I would put that under the banner. I mean, we could talk about this a lot. I would put that under the banner of personal self-leadership.
Yeah.
Because, imagine two different organisations. One, the old paradigm, I think we know what we mean by that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And another paradigm where people truly respected each other, people had actually done some work on themselves, so therefore they were able to have build rapport with each other, have a little bit of compassion for each other, and this kind of thing. So imagine the second one, whereby the business, that was just fundamental throughout the business at all levels. I mean, how different would that be? Would productivity be up or down?
Yeah, it's removing the dogma of dog eat dog world and moving into the notion of we are a team, which organisations spruik, but to say it and to do it is a little bit different.
Yes, yeah, sadly.
Yeah, that's right. But I guess with what you do, getting into the individuals, because you do one-on-one coaching, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And so working with an individual, what would be the number one key area where you would say someone came to you with struggles around integrating business and life together? Would there be an area or a tip or a focus that you would really hone in on for that individual to say, hey, this is where I truly believe we need to start?
See, that's a really nice question. Okay, so from where I sit, there's a couple of things. I mean, we can talk about business itself, of course. We can talk about how the human element plays out in that business. And then if we drill down further, we've got what is the issue is human development. What's the how of that? Well, I would say the how of that is personal self-leadership. So in my opinion, we need to teach personal self-leadership, and therefore we need to operate from top down, of course. So we, the leaders, need to be practicing personal self-leadership, and we need to be teaching it. So we need to be quite specific about that. So coming back more specifically back to your question, so from where I sit, good coaching is more about finding out what's going on and moving from that place, meeting the person where they're at. And of course, the direction forward is usually fairly obvious, but meeting that person, finding out what's really going on in their world, and then uncovering specifically what needs to be addressed, and then address those things with the person, and whether that means bringing that back out into the wider group or not. But yes, so certainly there are going to be things, and there will be things that we'll talk about under the banner of personal self-leadership, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So there's that as a generic way of looking at it.
Yeah.
So again, imagine if everybody, everybody in an organisation was operating with great personal self-leadership, and they took it importantly, and they're actually doing it. I mean, wow. I mean, it'd be a joy just to think about it,
wouldn't it? And question, personal self-leadership, my mind instantly goes to taking personal responsibility. So being responsible for our actions, considering our 50% in a situation or a dynamic or a argument as such. Is that what you mean by taking personal leadership?
Yeah, that and all the other characteristics of personal leadership. But I think that's probably one of the most important ones.
Yeah,
and I would agree with that totally. And when we're doing that well, I mean, it just overcomes a lot of problems before they happen. We solve our own problems, and of course that's a high trait of a good employee, isn't it? Just be able to solve our own problems. So how are we going to do that if we don't take that self-responsibility? So it's a very big one under self-leadership.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And as you said, as a coach, being able to look at the whole situation and going, what's going on for that individual at that point in time? Because gone are the days where we can say leave your stuff at the door.
Yes.
leave your bags at the door and come into work and be a perfect employee.
Yes.
We know that through now we're working from home a lot more, and our environments aren't as, I'm going to say, sterile as they used to be, because once upon a time it was in an office, 9 to 5, cross the T's, dot the I's and out the door.
Yes.
So it's a little bit more flexible now. So if you're looking at an individual's holistic approach and leading with taking personal responsibility, where would you start for that person and say, let's call him Sam. We've got Sam who's come to you and he's saying, Jeff, I'm really struggling. I'm really finding a difficult balance between managing work, managing life, managing kids, managing relationship, managing family. help me.
Great. And, this is just so often the case.
Yeah.
Again, there's a lot of things we can talk about, but the thing that just popped into my mind immediately you started talking about that is self-regulation. So, of course, by self-regulation, what I'm referring to there is, you could put it really under the banner of personal development if you want. But you see, we're already doing it, aren't we? Everybody is doing self-regulation to some degree. We drive on the roads and we hopefully keep somewhat to the speed limits, right? So and at home in the workplace, of course, and the same at home in our relationships, our personal relationships. So we're all always self-regulating to some degree.
Yeah, that's a great notion too. For
Yes.
some people who go, no, I'm not. The simple things like sticking to the speed limit or sitting through a set of ads on TV. That is
Yes.
like the world's best form of meditation.
Well, speaking of which, one of the great things that I think, I like to work with little tools along the way. And so coming back to your gentleman here who approached me and said, well, what do I do here? Yeah. Okay, so we're encouraging self-responsibility and self-regulation and awareness. Now, there's been a lot of press given to mindfulness. What is mindfulness? In a word, it's basically being aware moment to moment. It seems so obvious, doesn't it? But how easy is it for us to get caught up? Right? So if we're going to start on this and go, well, where to from here? What do I do? I'm struggling. Well, again, under a word, I would say self-regulation. So we need to have a chat about what does that mean to that person and what difference would it make?
Yeah.
One of the tools to help us with awareness and self-regulation and this kinds of things is what I would call a mini meditation. And if I may, we'll just cover that really briefly.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So I call it 10 breaths.
Yeah.
So it's very simple. And the thing is, it takes like less than half, or depending on how deep you breathe, anywhere between half a minute to a minute. So there's never an excuse not to do it. And we can go to the loo, close the door, and nobody has to know. See, so this is why it's really good, because there is no excuse.
Yeah.
So it's very much what it sounds like. So what's its main function? State change. Okay. So, sorry, what was the gentleman's name?
Sam.
Sam. Let's stick with Sam. So Sam says, look, I'll be happy with anything. Just give me something. Well, number one, we need to have Sam earn this, right? So we get Sam to be more aware of what his behaviours are, how he's interacting with people around him and things like that. That comes back to the process of coaching. Then we apply tools such as this and he goes, well, okay, I hear you. This all sounds good, but how do I do that? How do I change my state? I'm getting myself worked up. I'm getting anxietous. What am I going to do about that? Okay, here's technique number one. So 10 breaths. So at that moment we go, oh yeah, that's right, I can do this 10 breaths. All right. Now, if you're really good and you're skilled and you can camouflage, you can probably do it while you're sitting at your desk. But if not, go to the loo, right? So 10 breaths, very simple. It's simply a matter of having no distraction and then become aware of your breath on the in-breath, become aware of your breath on the out-breath, and silently say the word 10. Observe the next breath in. Observe the next breath out.
All right. I reckon we should do this, like actually do it. So
Okay.
can we?
Yeah.
Listeners, wherever you are, hopefully you're in a car driving or out for a walk maybe where we can stop for a minute or even half a minute. Let's all do this together.
One little proviso, if you're driving the car,
Yeah. Don't need to pull over.
you can semi-do this.
There you go.
Your focus is driving the car. Okay.
All right. Yes. Driving first, breathing second.
That's it. You got it.
All right. Go for it.
All right. So I'll just finish that again and then finish that off and then we'll actually do it, right? Okay. So 10 breaths, conscious decision, Go to the loo if you have to. Takes between half a minute to a minute, so there's always time. Purpose, change state, relax, feel good, become more efficient. Okay, so we're doing it, and again, we'll become silent in a moment. So beginning silently saying 10, next breath down 9, and so forth, down to 1. And then gently come back to normal awareness. Yeah. So we're going to do that right now?
Let's do it.
Okay.
I'm going to close my eyes.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's go ahead. And just at your own time, your own breathing.
Welcome back.
Do you know, one time I was leading a group in meditation, and one of the ladies, as she was coming back, as she was able to speak, she just said, "There's nothing." And it was just so you could really get where she was coming from.
Yeah.
Everything had gone. Any fears, stress, thoughts, worries, they're all gone.
Yeah.
Now, admittedly, it's short term. It's not meant to solve the problems of the world. But how cool to be able to state change at any given moment.
So quickly. And I know I lost count really, really fast. So I was using my fingers. Because even saying the numbers out loud, I was focusing on the number that was next. And then all of a sudden I was so comfortable in my breathing that I just stopped counting in my head and was using my fingers. But it's a moment of silence that unless we choose that moment of silence, we may not get it.
Absolutely. Very well said. So we have to factor these things in. And you know, one of the ways you can do that is you can actually put little reminders on your phone.
The Apple Watch actually
yes.
tells you and says breathe, and it vibrates at the time that you need to be breathing in and breathing out to lower your heart rate.
Oh, wow.
It is incredible, and it does it without prompt. Like, it's not something you have to set on the Apple Watch. It actually does it instinctively.
I love it.
And my daughter's actually worn the Apple Watch to school this week because she's had some issues at school. And so I said, in case of emergency, just wear it.
Yes.
And she came home after the second day and I said, how was your day? And she's like, I was actually getting a bit upset today. And the Apple Watch reminded me to breathe.
Wow.
So I breathed with the watch as it was vibrating on my wrist.
Bring on technology. I love it.
It's not all bad.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's another way, a little reminder.
Yeah, fabulous.
But it was really interesting and something that I just said there about choosing, and this, you and I have spoken about this a couple of times, but I would like to take you back to that day that we did meet at the beach and we were standing looking out over the ocean, waiting for the rain to disappear slightly, and we got talking about your trip.
Yes.
And the ocean itself and wanting to be on a boat and spend an amount of time on the boat, and that for me landed really deeply because I feel as though there is a real connection between the ocean, and I call her a her, but you can call her whatever you like, and the respect that one must have for the ocean. And it's a bit like, I find it's a universal concept again, but I really enjoyed the way that you were able to speak into your desires to spend time on the ocean and what that means for you. So would you so kindly just share your philosophies around the ocean and the respect and your experiences with that?
And isn't it interesting how most people are attracted to the ocean, whether it's to go and sit by the beach, and it can be because they're in a state of joy, or it could be because they're in a state of sorrow. And it's just one of those universal pick-me-ups. But yes, I've had some experiences with the ocean. I've been connected with the ocean all my life. I've had the privilege of doing one other trip, yachting trip from here up almost to the tip of Queensland, and grabbed a mate of mine, and we just jumped on board and headed off. And he was supposed to have known how to sail, and I did the coastal navigation course, being the skipper. Get out there, of course, he didn't know how to sail, so that was all cool. We got
figure it out along the way.
We got about 100 kilometres north of Morton Island, and lo and behold, we got our first storm. So we learned how to sail a boat rather quickly. But it's a very interesting question, that, because there's a connection with the ocean, and from a boating point of view, there's something different to fear, right? So that there's this connection which most people can relate to. There's a fear of the ocean, which a lot of people would stop them from going on the ocean. And then there's this other thing, which, as you say, is a respect, and it's a very deep respect that I have for the ocean. And what it does is it replaces the fear. So as I think about that, whether it's in our personal life or whether it's in our business life or whether it's out there on the ocean, it's a very interesting concept, because if we can replace some of our fears with something else, I mean, how good is that? I'm sure that's something that I think could probably be spoken about more, on a bit more thought. But anyway, a huge respect. And I'm just so excited about the next trip I'm going to do. Yeah. But I'm also, I like to be mindful of these kinds of things. I always think about things like that. How can we, eliminate fear and be more proactive in life? I've got this little. We spoke briefly about part of this earlier. I have this little affirmation thing. It's living deliberately, acting fearlessly, and loving the journey.
Oh, I love that.
And which is why I put it on the front of my book, The Power of Happiness, live deliberately, awaken the soul within. And, living deliberately, isn't that what we want? And freedom, and because we've had a taste of our freedoms challenged, and probably not the first time, but,
sure it won't be the last time either.
And this is why it's so important for us to have adaptability, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you said in there around replacing the fear with respect. And on a similar tangent, I used to have a fear of public speaking, and look at me now, I get to travel the world and speak.
Lovely.
And it was a moment in time when I was, and this is something I've spoken about on the podcast before, at the age of 30, I learnt my emotions for the first time. It was like sticking Post-it notes on where was fear, where was sadness, where was happiness, what was guilt, what was shame. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's more than just happy and sad.
Yes.
And so what I realised in doing that exercise was that excitement and nerves both show up in the same way. So I was able to train my brain that every time I felt nervous about speaking, oh, you're not nervous, you're excited.
Yes.
You're excited, which means that you want to be here, which means that you really, truly are committed to doing what you're about to do. Not that I'm scared shitless. It's that I'm excited.
Yes.
And so by being able to replace that, I was able to overcome a huge fear of mine and now have a beautiful career in doing this. So the notion of being able to replace one with the other, it's such an incredible resource or tool. Do you have any words of advice of how someone might do this?
I was thinking as you were speaking, the great thing about it, the biology and is amazing. But flipping over for a second to the neurology, the great thing about it is everything we do is imprinted on the neurology, right? So we know that now, the neuroscience and stuff. We know a lot about this sort of stuff. But it's very easy to go throughout a day or perhaps a life without realising what we're actually doing. So when we're looking to make change, basically from a psychological point of view, there's cognitive and then there's behavioural change, right? So change happens in many forms, and the great thing about it is for us novices, you know, who are not psychologists or rocket scientists or whatever, once we understand that and really get it, we can go, oh, so does that mean more every time I take the reins and I overcome that feeling, dare we call it a negative feeling, which probably isn't, right? Every time I do that, whether it's by way of words or by way of actions, I'm actually re-imprinting into my neurology. And man, that's where it all stores. I mean, you think about it, everything we have ever thought, learned, accessed, it's all in there. Yeah. Where is it?
Yeah.
Well, that's still a little bit up for debate. You know, is it only in the unconscious mind, whatever is in the cells throughout the body and things like that? But the one thing we can probably all agree upon is it gets imprinted, the behaviour, the new behaviour, moment to moment, gets imprinted into our neurology.
Yeah, I love that. And what you said before around the potential negative emotion is the one that kind of sticks. It is just our way of protection. It's something that we've experienced or learnt or heard or seen in the past that for some reason or another, whether we were little, whether we were big, our fight or flight's kicked in and we've gone, oh, protect. And so we're just trying to protect ourselves. So again, it's simple as in terms of what was imprinted in that protection can now be reprinted in a positive.
Absolutely. And these protection parts of us come in for very good reasons, you know, and they start very, very early in life, might be 2 years old. And, you know, this part of the pleaser, for example, kicks in and then, you know, the inner critic as time goes by kicks in and on and on and on and on it goes. So a lot of these things that we deal with, you know, they're there for very good reasons.
Yeah.
What we need to do, however, is we need to be aware of how well they're working and how well we can modify them. There's an analogy I like. You know, the psychological car, you're driving along and you're driving and then you've got all these parts of you, sub-personalities if you like, sitting in the back seat. The challenge and the great part about it is you can access those and you kind of grab the one from behind and this one's now driving the car when need be, you know, like if we're at the office or, you know, stressed out, you know, doing business all day and then we go home to our partner, we need to be able to change roles, don't we? And we need to be rather good at that. So, you know, it's not like we need to get rid of our sub-personalities. We need to be aware of them. We need to modify them, and sometimes it's useful to have assistance to do that.
Yeah.
So this is the great thing about it. I mean, and the journey. I mean, the journey is endless. And the thing is, as we work through some of our basic stuff, if we're interested, and usually once we've done some work on our basic stuff, we become increasingly interested. And what happens is our lessons become increasingly subtle, but they're there and they're going to be there forever. Something to do with the nature of the human being.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, how wonderful it's like the times we live in. I mean, we live in wonderful times.
Oh, we know more now than we ever have. Yeah. And it's literally at our fingertips. We are so blessed with everything we have. And I feel as though a lot of the times that we do decide to go down the path, like Sam has, and we say, hey, I've had enough, I need some help, or I need some guidance. In those times and in those moments, it is generally our more negative parts that are louder and are taking over and are driving the car, because the quieter ones can't, pop up as loud or aren't as big or whatever it might be. But I feel it's really important to remember that we have those positive parts inside of us. Our wisdom is inside of us at every single moment. And while we've got the inner critic and we've got the self-doubt and we've got the judgment, like the wisdom and the kindness and the nurturer inside of us, they're still there. But in those moments of despair, they just can't yell as loud. So sometimes knowing and whether or not we're in our rational brain, depending on how deep we are down that kind of pit of despair, is there a technique or a tip that you would give someone in that kind of deep pit? And I know we've spoken about self-regulation, but this is more of I know for me that when I'm in that kind of pit, you don't think about the ways to get out. Thinking about the ways to get out, or how do I just pull on that wisdom of mine that's there, that rational brain, that nurturer that just needs to tell me everything's going to be okay and it's going to pass. Is there something that you have got in your little tool bag to help someone like Sam who may be, in the pits, to just go, hey, just remember this little tip or trick, and, it could take you to the positive side?
Yeah. So the thing that our Sams of the world are learning is that when we practice tools and techniques, the best time to do that is when things are going well.
Yes. I love that you said that, because that's the time we never think about it.
Yes, indeed. And so that's like things like the 10 breaths, it's so important to do it regularly. When we're feeling good, it's very easy to do nothing.
Oh my gosh, yeah, and you forget. You're like, oh, we're fine, this is great, life's good.
Yeah.
I don't need to work on me. Look at me, I'm perfect.
Absolutely. How could I be wrong? But when we're in the pit, very different thing, and we go, oh, how come I don't know what to do? I'm feeling so bad. It's like, oh, poor me, and all of that. So that's only part of it, but that's an important part of it, is to go, well, what do I need to learn here? What's the bigger picture here? And if this question is appropriate, why is my life the way it is? Why is my home life not as good as it could be? And why do I find myself down the same pit again in the workplace or whatever? Yeah. And so I think that's part of the solution there is, and there's a lot of techniques, awareness again, increasing awareness, like simple little things. Again, would you do this when you're actually in the pit? Probably not. We'll come back to that. But things like saying, well, this is a technique, right, for expanding our awareness. It's like meditation. What meditation does, it allows the gap between the thoughts to expand, which is a way of things to reset in our brain, right? And which is one of the reasons why we come out of it feeling so refreshed. So in a similar way, we need to be doing other things. We need other techniques. And honestly, I have on my phone, I just keep adding to them on my phone that I share with people and things like that, but also for my own use. I reckon I've got more than 100 just things, like 10 breaths.
Yeah,
right?
okay. Like little reminders.
Just because I don't want to lose them.
Yeah.
You can't do them all at once, but I don't want to lose them. So they're all there. And then what I do is I train myself to read, and this is another technique in itself.
This is the practice.
Right? Yeah, it's a good one for Sam. So as you learn these things, put them somewhere where you can find them and use them, right? And so what I like to do, ideally I'd like to do it once a day, but I don't, but I still do keep going back to it, and I'll actually read through it and I go, oh my goodness, wow, it's powerful. So other little techniques, for example, one could ask oneself, I wonder what my next thought is going to be. That assumes a position of stopping, taking some level of command, and the trick is to shut up.
Wow.
So we're going to have the awareness first. So the awareness happens and we go, oh, I'm going to do that. So ask the question silently. People might think you're crazy. I wonder.
It's all right. We'd rather be crazy than boring.
yeah, absolutely. I wonder what my next thought is going to be. Stop. Watch for it. It's like watching for the mouse to pop out of the mouse hole, you know? And then it'll go how it goes, right? It's just a little thing, right?
It's incredible though, because it also then instantly creates separation between I and the thought. Because for a lot of people, they believe that their thoughts are their own. And while, yes, we've had these thoughts, and yes, there's millions of thoughts out there, these thoughts have been around for a very long time. And these thoughts have been thought of by other people over time as well. So even in that moment, because in the pit, it's I am worthless, I am this, I'm not good enough, I'm blah, 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 blah. Creating that separation between yourself and the thought of even just saying, I wonder what I'm going to think of next, instantly goes, now I'm observing the thought instead of being the thought.
Totally. So what you're saying there is so relevant. So self-talk is a big one 24/7, isn't it?
It's noisy up there.
And specifically when Sam's down the pit.
Yeah.
Isn't that a great time? Because see, this is the thing, we've got to determine what things are usable at the time. It's like saying there is a philosophy to say that if you never get angry, you're less likely to get angry. So you train yourself to never get angry. The problem with that is if you're such that you have an outburst, in that moment you don't have choice. So the key is, as I say, recognising what tools can you use when. Okay. So even when you're down in the pit, that's the one thing you can do because you know this. We know this intuitively, plus we've learned it, we've read it, we've heard it on the podcast.
You heard it here first.
So we know self-talk is something that we can all change, no matter how far down the pit we are. Now, admittedly, sometimes we're so far down it's hard to do much. We need to acknowledge that. We need to accept that, but there is still something we can do. Just having the awareness, we can go, oh, it's all too hard, poor man. But you know what? It's going to be better than not doing anything. So what do I need to do? Oh, I need to think about something nice. I need to think about someone that I love. I need to think about why am I here in the first place. I need to think about what's the benefit of me coming to work. Oh, that's right. I'm putting extension on the house. Whatever. We're going for a trip overseas in 2 years' time. Whatever.
Yeah.
You know, that might be getting a bit too far into it, but depending on far down, you know, self-talk and self-regulation. Self-talk is the big one of the big ones, isn't it?
It really is.
And so we all need to be onto ourselves for this, and we need to be mindful. So the more we can, things like, well, I wonder what my next thought's going to be, increases mindfulness. So not much happens without self-awareness or mindfulness. This is a more recent term for many, mindfulness, but it's been around forever, and it's important. So the more we increase these kinds of things, then the more tools we have, because the more open our mind is, and the more available we are to do these things. If we're so, you know, how sometimes people get so locked into the detail and their mind is kind of like gripped in the detail, and there's no expansiveness, and so therefore and somebody goes, well, what about, oh, I'm busy right now, and nothing gets in, you know. So
there's a notion that I've just kind of landed in terms of when you go down into that pit, there is a real sense of being like, oh my God, my life is derailed. And it derails and it goes down, and you can't stop but thinking all the bad things and the fear and the anxiety and the stress and the I shouldn't have done this in grade 6 and I shouldn't have done that to that person and I shouldn't have said this. And it is, you literally go, hey, I've just derailed my happiness. But I feel as though with these techniques that you're mentioning, there's no reason why we can't then derail the unhappiness and start making that track go back up. And that line of thought that you just spoke about then, whether it's relevant to anyone's situation or not, but it's just those little things of being, all right, if I can't keep thinking this way, how am I going to think? Which way am I going to go? I can keep going down, but bloody hell, I don't feel good now. Imagine how worse I'm going to feel then. What if I just tried to be like, you don't have to make out that your life is full of rainbows and bloody unicorns.
Yes.
It's the simple things. It's great. I get to pick the kids up from school today.
Yes.
Wonderful. Maybe I'll go and buy them an ice cream. Okay, great.
Yes.
Then we can start thinking about, hey, I'm going to work an extra couple of hours this week, so I'm going to have a little bit of money in the bank. That'll feel really good. And it's the little tiny things that can start to tilt it's like driving a car. I know my bloody car has got the lane corrector.
Oh, yes.
So I can't drive other lanes even if I wanted to. Not that I want to. It's a great little thing for me. But it feels a bit like life sometimes, right?
Yes.
You're driving, and all of a sudden you start to veer off. And then if you've got the awareness to tap into your tool bag, it's that little like nudge. No, back you go. And then you start to go along and you veer off again and you, like the car automatically just puts you back on the tracks.
Yes.
There are times when cars fail and we end up going off the side of the road, but that for me is the part where it's like, that's your job. That's your choice to then make a 1% change in the thoughts, a 1% change in the awareness, the actions, whatever it might be. It doesn't have to be drastic, but get that car back on the tracks, derail the unhappiness and put your power of happiness into living deliberately.
Oh, wow. Nice. Yeah.
That felt really good.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. And there was a lot spoken in that, like that self-responsibility came back in, I could hear, and to me, it's developing ourselves along the way. I mean, this notion, for example, of paying it forward. So obviously when we're in the pit, that's not when we're going to be doing it, but what about all the other times? Yeah. What does that do for the person, the recipient? They go, wow, there's hope for humanity after all, right? And then for us, what does it do for us? We go, oh, wow, I feel so good, I was able to influence somebody in a positive way, you know. And this is just an interesting thing, whether, again, for us personally and or in the business, same thing but different, right, is, well, again, I put it under the banner of becoming a better human being, a better person. Yeah. So the more we can interact with each other and see each person, as we're on the same side, we're on the same team. Again, whether you're on the road or whether you're at work, it's if we can develop these kinds of thinkings, the pay it forward, little things like, when somebody else has a win, right? It could be as monstrous as the pools, the lotto or something, right? Yeah. Or it can be a little thing. Somebody had a win that maybe you didn't have that you might have liked to have. There's a training that can go with that we can actually train ourselves to feel good with another person's when they have a win. And just quickly, I had a friend of mine not so long ago. He said he was walking down the mall and there was this lady there and he smiled at her, but she didn't smile back. Now, I already know why he would have smiled at her. Anyway, and he said, and he was just, he was ticked off that she didn't smile back. Yeah. And I said, well, did you ever contemplate giving her an unconditional smile? And he goes, well, why would I do that? Now, I'm not trying to put the guy down, but I'm just trying to illustrate. We develop these things, right? So we have a lot to do with destiny by virtue of how we think, our attitude, behaviours we exhibit, understanding the principle of everything's being imprinted anyway, so best you choose well, because the more you do something, the more you're going to be inclined to do it, possibly whether you like it or not, right? So all of these choices that we make, knowing that we become a better person, and essentially for another term, if you like, we can be living in service, right? And so there's all these wonderful things that we can do. It's all about, comes back to that original thing, we talk about personal self-leadership. It's not just to appease the boss at work or whatever. It's a thing that allows us to have a whole better life. And same in the workplace. So as we grow and evolve, it's like when I've worked with couples, and I first thing I say to one couple, get them aside, and I say to the person, I'll say, okay, you've come to me because you've got some challenges in your relationship. Please bear with me with what I'm about to say, but I don't want to know about your relationship. I want to know about you.
Mm.
And the same with the other person when I've got them aside. Let's face it, where else is there? There is nowhere else.
No, that's right.
There's no relationship other than what's inside of us, and of course we're interacting. You know,
And what each person's bringing.
what each person brings to it, and it's just a good part again. Talk about self-responsibility, even in such a critical arena as relationship. If one person's willing to change and the other one's not, if the other one's closed right down, the first person can still do their thing. They can work on themselves, and ultimately, let's be real about it. Ultimately, it will help the relationship anyway.
Yeah.
But if ultimately it gets to the point that whether they have to go different ways, then so be it. But that person was still able to grow and become a better human being.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a benefit to it. Someone said to me once, it's taking the responsibility of personal growth, especially when it comes to a relationship. We can't control or change anybody else. All we can do is ourselves in here. And if that means that we grow together, beautiful. But if that means we grow apart, then that too can be beautiful.
Yes.
Because that person can then go and find their happy place and potentially go on their own journey, whichever way life decides to take them. And then the person who has decided to keep growing and change can do the exact same thing. So I feel as though there is a silver lining in both instances, even though some may be seen as a negative and a positive. But your friend that you were talking about too, it's really interesting because the human conditioning, we're wired for connection. So in that attempt to smile at someone, which is a beautiful gesture to do, and then not receiving in return highlights an expectation.
Yes.
And going, I smiled at that woman because I wanted to receive a smile back. And my needs haven't been met, so I'm upset.
Absolutely. And if I can expand on that notion of unconditionals just a little bit. Now, here's an interesting one. So we know what, roughly speaking, we know what unconditional is. I'm just going to move sideways slightly and come back. Wouldn't it be interesting if in relationships, if we had unconditional love? Wow. Anyway, that's a whole nother story, a whole nother conversation. So this thing of unconditionalness, I've thought about this a few times in the context of business. It's interesting. So, okay, let's have a think about this. You go to work, do your job. Now, whether you're the employer, the CEO, the office worker, it doesn't matter. We're all doing roughly the same thing, right? So if we choose to take on this notion of doing things unconditionally, what might that look like? And you go, well, but Jeff, you're getting paid. How can it be unconditional? Well, guess what? It's an attitude. So imagine for the employer, the employee, partner A or partner B in a relationship, or basically any situation, you imagine if we were to operate unconditionally.
And just quickly in there, my very simplistic definition of unconditional is to acknowledge the opposite, which is conditions, which means to have conditions. So to be unconditional means no conditions.
Yes.
So even when you're talking about at work, you have a job description, you're getting paid to do that job description. The unconditional element of it is you do your absolute best to fulfill that job description.
Yes.
Show up.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And so, we can do this. We can actually, it's something that actually requires a little bit of thought as well as doing. And it's easy to come up with resistances or to just not even value it, But the more we think about it, it becomes a very nice way of living. And, let's face it, relationship itself, I mean, boy, I think about vows, and I think about what is the average person's take on love within a relationship, and then you think about wedding vows and all of that, right? And you think about change in the modern world, and how, quote, relatively easy it is to get out, and all of that, and like, wow.
Yeah.
And so I sometimes think, well, what does unconditional love look like?
Yeah. Because even though my mind's just going, in normal, I would assume in average relationships, it's like, oh, well, he will do this and then I will do this and then he will do this for me and I will do this for him. They're all conditions.
Absolutely.
They are all, that's almost like a job description.
Yes.
And vows, similarly.
And how often we'll hear things like, oh, I will love you forever.
Yeah.
Well, hang on here. What are you saying?
Yeah.
If I beat you up 3 times a week, are you going to still love me forever?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah.
So it's, it might be good to be just aware of what we're doing. What are we actually doing?
Absolutely.
And I think this is part of, from what I can see, this is part of where you're coming from with in largely a business environment where you're going, well, hang on, we can bring principles from today's thinking, and which can be broader. And so, we need our strategies because bottom line's still important, because if there's no good bottom line, then there's no people, there's no business. So clearly we have to have good business practices in place. We have to have strategies in place. But of course, what we're talking about here is the human element of that. And so as we move forward, wow, I mean, it's a fantastic opportunity filled with challenges, but a great opportunity. And you look at AI, just for one. I was watching, what's the lady's name on the internet? Our ambassador for AI robot.
Oh my goodness, no.
Whatever her name is. Anyway, having a listen to that.
Yeah.
Fascinating. She was being interviewed, and man, she had some pretty savvy answers, And so anyway, these are the times we're in, and you think, man, you mentioned Kiani earlier about adaptability, and man, if we're not developing our adaptability, we're going backwards, because guess what? Everything else is moving forward. Technology is moving forward. Some of the things we don't like are moving forward.
Absolutely.
And I just want to say on that point there, I've said for a long time, I believe in the world generally we have what I call a so-called good camp, and we have a so-called bad camp, with all the things that are going on.
Yeah.
But the great thing about it is we always have choice. We really do have choice, whether it's, in a number of areas. We get to choose who we belong to. We get to choose our own thoughts. We get to choose our attitudes. And this is the great part, I think, about life, And this is the thing that will not change in any time soon.
Change is one thing that we can't avoid, but it's also something that we have a choice in every moment. People say, actually I heard a stat yesterday from a good friend of mine that 91% of our thoughts we go to sleep with, we wake up with the next day. How scary is that? How scary is that?
I know.
No wonder when you're in the pit, you can't get out of the bloody pit, because you've only got 9% of positive thoughts that are trying to creep their way in that weren't there yesterday.
There you go.
So choosing to live deliberately, not as a whole, not as a big grand gesture, but in every single moment.
So on that note, here's another little technique. When we first, again, we're talking about re-imprinting the nervous system. When we first gain consciousness in the morning after sleep, very first moment is the time to start. What do you want to put in there? Because you know how easy it is to wake up and your mind might be busy because you might have had a busy dream session or whatever. You might have had a tough day the day before. You might be worried about something bad might have happened in your life, whatever. So it's very easy, and we've all done it, where you wake up and first thing your mind just takes off.
Yeah.
And it's not all positive.
Or you pick up your phone.
Pick up your phone. Yep. Or you're worried about the events of the day, whatever. So a part of living deliberately and choosing the lifestyle that we want to live, which works both at home and in the workplace, is again, it's state change based on why state change. Why would we want a state change so frequently? Because of the re-imprinting process that's happening 24/7. Do you want it the way you want it, or do you want someone else to be in control of it?
Yeah.
So first thing in the morning, we first gain consciousness, choose. It might take a bit of practice, because if we're in the habit of fearful thoughts, for example, jumping in, doesn't matter. Start, come back to it, come back to it, come back to it. Have the commitment. I'm going to talk about commitment in a moment. Come back to it, come back to it, come back to it. And then what happens, and I do this all the time, every morning now, I choose my state, so that first, very, very, very first moment, before even a thought gets in, before even one thought gets in. Now, I just choose to think about what I want to think about, and it's often a feeling. It might be, one of them, it might be feeling, it could be things like kindness, it could be whatever your thing is, right? One that I find is loving kindness, right? So it's not so much a thought as it's a feeling. So I just go there, and it's like I'm just there, 100% there. There is no room for anything negative, right? And again, it'll require a bit of commitment depending on where you're at with this type of thing. But again, see, these things that go on, there are honestly, I think there are 1,000 different ways that we can work with ourselves.
And you don't actually need anyone else. Waking up in the morning, you are in your bed. It doesn't matter who's next to you. That is here in your head. That is the only thing that is controlling that choice in that moment.
Absolutely. Isn't that great? And, when we extrapolate that out, you think of how many times that is the case. You think about, okay, what's on TV, for example, we may not like. Well, you don't have to watch
That's right. Turn it off.
And how come the world doesn't support me in this?
Yeah.
Well, how about I create my own support, self-responsibility?
Correct. Yeah.
All these things, really, honestly,
Yeah.
this is why we, and I know we're in agreement with this, and I'm sure the listeners are as well. I wouldn't doubt for a moment. We are in really, truly in good times. Not to be Pollyanna and unrealistic and weird about it and go, there's no problems on this planet. No, there are a lot of problems.
There's lots of problems, but
the point is, there are things. What's the? Let me think about this. The serenity prayer. God grant me serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. How beautiful!
Yeah.
Because if we're spending our energy again at work, in the workplace, or at home, same thing. If we're spending any amount of energy on the things that we can't control, what a waste. Plus, we're probably interfering in the wrong way.
Absolutely.
Whereas if we regain that energy and spend that on all the things that we can control, change, be responsible for, like behaviour, our own behaviour, our thoughts, etc. All
emotional
of that.
state. Yeah, absolutely. We have the control within us. We just need to realise how powerful we are.
Yeah, and keep bringing ourselves back to responsibility.
Yeah. And you mentioned a beautiful word, which I love so much, in commitment. And I feel like this might be a beautiful way to wrap up our little session on Sam as well, because for someone like Sam, who has now just received all of these beautiful tools and know-hows and awareness and learning, and even just little insights into ways to think a little differently or be a little different, feel a little differently, I feel like commitment is going to be a beautiful a beautiful piece of the pie that's going to just bring it all home for us.
Absolutely. Okay, so I just want to expand that a little bit. There's a quote here from Van Gogh on commitment. So, until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness concerning all acts of initiative and creation. There is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans, that the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events ensues from the decision, raising in one's favour all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings and material assistance which no man could have dreamed would have come his way. Whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power and magic in it. Begin it now.
What a remarkable man. Yeah, wow. There's so much beauty in that. And I feel like it just perfectly expands on what we spoke about, which is commitment is within. And if you surrender to the commitment that you're making to yourself and simply bring it back inside, take personal responsibility for your actions, for your behaviors, for your emotions, then the outside world doesn't impact us so deeply or so badly or so boldly. And as he said beautifully at the bottom, I'm stealing your quote, that says, whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Begin now.
So great, isn't it? And to also remember we are humans on a path. We do the best we can with what we've got, and to accept that and to move forward.
That is incredible. That is incredible. Thank you so much for your time today.
My absolute pleasure.
Do you have any other little tips and tricks before we head off? Because I want to make sure we've covered off everything Sam needs.
Do you have another 2 hours?
Okay, episode 2 will be dropping.
I have one.
Go for it.
And it's a quote which we've all heard. It's so relevant to everything we've talked here. And that is, be the change you wish to see. Thank you, Mr. Gandhi.
Oh, it's so true. It's so true. And look, I mean, as you said, you wrote this book, The Power of Happiness, living deliberately and awakening the soul within. I feel like so many of us get so bogged down in life that we forget that we actually have a choice to change it.
Oh, yes.
And that soul of ours that is unique to us has never actually seen the sunlight. And if anything here today, you've just learned a handful, like I can't even count how many tips and tricks and little pieces of wisdom that we've left our listeners with today. So thank you so much for sharing in those things. And I know there was a reason that we met, and I'm so grateful. I've been given a copy of this book and I can't wait to start reading it. But for everyone that's listening, where can they find you? Tell us a little bit about your company. And, just let them know where to reach out.
Best place to find me is on my website. The book, I'm just thinking about that. The book, The Power of Happiness, diverts through to my website, right? So if you go on the internet for The Power of Happiness, that'll go through to my website, or the website has reference to the book anyway, so which is fireinyourbellycoaching.com.au. So that's the best place.
I found you on LinkedIn.
Oh, yes.
And you were very responsive, which is wonderful. So, but I love it. Fire in your belly coaching. It's so remarkable, and it's exactly what you do. It's exactly what you stand for. And as I said, that chance meeting that day, I knew that there was so much wisdom in you, and we got talking about Dr. Hawkins' work, and we've spoken about avatar work, and there's so many elements of personal development, growth, awareness out there, and you have an abundance of information.
Can I also add to that too? I think what's really good is for us humans to just keep expanding. You know, it all happens. We don't have to, it's my opinion, we don't have to panic about where we're going to get to in life. If we have an open mind and if we're somewhat diligent, we attract who we need into our lives. So the expansiveness is useful. So what flashed through my mind when Kiani was speaking just then was I've been popping up to the little Buddhist institute up at Udlo there for 25 years. I'm not a Buddhist, and you don't need to be a Buddhist. All I'm saying is that I've learnt a lot there, and it's helped to expand my paradigm. So whether you're into spirituality, religion or not, I just think for us mere mortals to keep an open mind and an open heart, because we attract from the heart. And so if we have an abundance of heart, we tend to attract abundance in our life. And we all know it includes, but it's more than about the dollars in the bank. And this is a part of the new paradigm, of course. I mean, you can't live on this planet without any money. So, money's a good thing. We love it. But it's not enough because we're humans. Yeah. And the power of purpose and meaning and things like that. Yeah. So, keep expanding.
I love it. I love it so much. And thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today. And thank you to all of you for tuning in once again to listen to the She Can Humanise Business podcast. You can find us on all of the podcast platforms, Apple, Google, all the fancy ones out there, and all over social media. So thank you once again, and I look forward to hearing or speaking with you next week. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I would love to hear your feedback around what resonated and what key lessons and learnings that you took out of today's episode. You can find me on Instagram and on LinkedIn under the She Can Humanise Business podcast or Kiani Mills. I really hope that you were able to see, feel and experience a new way of humanising business.